we got 32% of the vote. We can't even characterize our expectation for this because there's so much outstanding, and there can be such big swings in the vote that comes in because it's late arriving mail ballots. It's mail ballots that were dropped off on Election Day. It's piles of ballots that they process, very slowly. And so you get these updates maybe once a day, once every few days, and the numbers slowly tick up. But some of these districts, won't be called maybe even until December.
Wow, what a prediction there from NBC News national political correspondent Steve Kornacki, of course, at the big board. Joining me now is Pennsylvania Congresswoman Madeleine Dean, a Democratic member of the House Judiciary and Financial Services Committees. As I welcome you, first of all, your reaction to what you heard Steve Kornacki just say, December?
Well, I have to admit to you, number one, I hope Steve gets some sleep. My God, he has been doing some amazing reporting.
Amazing.
But I don't think that's entirely surprising. These elections, and you saw it here in Pennsylvania, are razor thin in some cases. So it is important that every vote count. We know in Georgia we're headed to a runoff. So I'm patient, believing that every vote should count, and believing that what it really reveals is there was no red wave. Democrats did extraordinarily well.
They did. In fact, major victories there in Pennsylvania this week on top of your own reelection, which I'm applauding. Democrats added two new House members, a second Democratic senator, a new Democratic governor. How significant are these wins for Pennsylvania and, in fact, Democrats in general?
Oh, it's extraordinary. I really want to compliment the voters of Pennsylvania. You saw in the top races, our Governor-elect Shapiro winning by 14 points. Over a Trumpster, an insurrectionist, actually attended January 6th and broke through police barricades. You saw in the Fetterman race that people thought maybe he couldn't win. He won by, I think, 5 points, 4 to 5 points. So you saw that Pennsylvanians, voters, saw through, number one, the lies, the deception, and the fear-mongering. They also saw the quality of the candidates. It was a stark difference between Democrats and Republicans. In our own congressional delegation, the tough races like Susan Wild and Matt Cartwright, they won. And then the two new seats in Pittsburgh. Our first African-American woman member of Congress for Pennsylvania, Summer Lee, and then a veteran, Chris DeLuzio. So Democrats up and down the ballot did extremely well. Something else I wanted to point out to you that is so Pennsylvania and so this election cycle is what happened in the Pennsylvania State House. I used to serve there for 6 years. Look at where we are there. It looks like historically we might take the majority. We have been in the minority, Democrats, in the House and Senate for quite a long time. But right now, we have 101 seats. We need 103 to be the majority. And two of the seats that are in play right now look like they're going to go our way. It was a huge night for Pennsylvania.
Okay. Wow. It seems like Pennsylvania appears to be a uniform color these days instead of being purple as it has been. Let me ask you about what you're doing right now, which is running for vice chair of the Democratic caucus, which is holding its leadership election later this month. Why do you want to serve in this position, and what has been the response from your colleagues?
Oh, thank you for asking me about that. I'm very excited to make this run to be a part of our leadership team. What I've said to every one of my colleagues is that I want to be as useful as possible in this 118th Congress. Whether we are narrowly in the minority or narrowly in the majority, it's going to be extraordinarily important that every member of caucus be heard. You know what the Democratic caucus is? It is ours. It is actually our most important body where we tell our leadership what matters, what our districts need, what our differences are. So I want to do that to make sure every voice is heard in a trusted place. I said in my letter, I'm the youngest of 7 children. I know a little something about working in a complicated family, which is exactly what caucus is. It's a big, robust family, and I want to be there as vice chair to help lift every voice, every district, so that our policies and the legislation we put forward reflects our beautiful diversity.
I think that is a very interesting comment made about being the youngest of 7 children, and probably a point very well taken by your colleagues. Let me ask you about, speaking of colleagues, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who was asked if people want both parties to move from the fringes or the extremes back to the center. Let's take a listen together to her response.
As someone who is often, I think, characterized as extreme, I, of course, would object to that. I do not believe that I am as extreme in the way that Marjorie Taylor Greene on the Republican side is extreme. The idea that there is an equating of believing in someone who believes in guaranteed universal health care in the United States with someone who believes that undocumented people should incur physical harm are somehow in the same level of extreme is something that I would object to.
Do you agree with the AOC there? I mean, do progressive Democrats need to better define these contrasts to Americans the way she just did?
I think she did draw that out perfectly. It's a false equivalent to call Alexandria extreme as the same as Marjorie Taylor Greene. What she is progressive, and I happen to enjoy being a member of both the Progressive Caucus and the New Dems Caucus. We have to continue to call out that which is just plain false. Marjorie Taylor Greene inhabits the falsehoods of Trump world, which I want to say were so resoundingly rejected. Even if she wins re-election, they were resoundingly rejected, as was Donald Trump. You know, he's trying to maintain some relevance. But this election, I think, was a referendum on a couple of things. Number one, a referendum on will we continue to support election deniers? No, is the resounding call for many of these races. And number two, will we continue an erosion of people's rights, like health care and abortion rights? Voters came out in strong numbers to say we are going to protect women's rights, voting rights, equal rights, and we are going to reject the fear-mongering and election denying of those who still cling to Donald Trump.
All right. Well, I'm going to keep a very close eye on the Democratic leadership election. I wish you a lot of luck on that, my friend. Thank you so much for your time on this Saturday. Thank you. My next guest said there would be no red wave, his take on what could happen in Nevada, and why he says abortion extremism will cost Republicans for decades to come. Southern city of Kherson today as Russia retreats and the Ukraine military.
Hopefully, it's going to allow the more reasonable members of the Republican Party to take their party back from the extremists that have taken it over in recent years.
Okay.
30 cents more. And
seat over challenger Blake Masters, putting Democrats just one win away from maintaining their Senate majority. Joining me now, Simon Rosenberg, president and founder of New Democrat Network. He is a veteran of 2 presidential campaigns, including the 1992 Bill Clinton War Room. Also the strategist who called it early, saying the red wave had not arrived, pointing to new polls, early voting numbers, and calling out the GOP for gaming polling averages to create a false red wave narrative. Simon, thank you for joining me. You were all over my show last weekend, just so you know, even though I didn't have you in person. But look, to you, it was obviously not even a blue surprise. But first, following up to that report from Georgia, when you look at the scorecard there, with Republicans winning across the board, except for Herschel Walker, Governor, Secretary of State, Attorney General, Lieutenant Governor, even winning more House seats. What do you make of Walker's inability to win?
well, we know that there's been a wide rejection of MAGA, the right-wing philosophy of Donald Trump that replaced conservatism a few years ago as the governing ideology of the Republican Party. The real loser in this election is Donald Trump, MAGA, and extremism. And democracy, Democrats, Joe Biden are all the big winners of this election. And so you saw many of these very extreme candidates all across the country lose, including, you just had a report from Arizona, for example, right, where the Republican gubernatorial candidate there is one of the, premier election deniers in the Republican Party. And so this has been a good day. I think been a good week for the United States and America. I think people chose normalcy. They want to get back to their lives after COVID. They didn't want more chaos and craziness. And I think that's what went out in the election this past week.
You know, you've called it pretty accurately so far. So would you care to give me your prediction for Nevada, where votes are still being counted?
Yeah, so I think we're going to win the governor's race in Arizona. I think we're going to win the Senate race in Nevada. I think Cortez Masto's in good shape there. I don't know that we're going to win the governor's race there, however. And the real interesting story to me right now is what's happening in the House. I mean, there is a wide belief now that we are going to get up to 216, 217. The House may just be decided by a single seat. It's just kind of unimaginable. Wow. Now, either way, right? I mean, and we are not giving up the idea that we could actually hold on to the House. And so that's where I think a lot of the real drama is going to be over the next few days. And because we haven't had a House this close in a long time. And Alex, can I just say one thing? The core argument that my partner, Tom Bonnier, and I were making over the last few months was that we weren't seeing a red wave. We were seeing a close competitive election, which is what we're seeing now. This is an incredibly close election.
Which brings me to my next question, because you are already deciphering how the next couple of years are going to play out. You're looking at Kansas and Michigan in particular. Why do you think abortion extremism is going to cost Republicans, as you say, for decades to come, especially if some states actually settle the question, as we saw happen on Tuesday? 5 states did that.
I think this is such an extreme assault on fundamental rights that this is going to cause what I call brand degradation, the degradation of the Republican Party brand for tens of millions of young people who just may never view the Republican Party ever again the way that they did, because it's so personal. I mean, obviously, for a woman to lose bodily autonomy is a lot more important than eggs costing 30 cents more. And I think that, you know, the Republicans really screwed up. I mean, this was bad policy. It's very unpopular. They're going to cause extraordinary harm to many, many people across the country over the next few years. And I think that it's very possible that after, and I think it's going to be hard for the Republicans to really come to understand the gravity of what's happened to them, because this was seen as a victory for them. It was success, 50 years of fighting to end Roe, and then there was a popular uprising against it. That popular uprising may continue for election after election to come. And so the Republicans, I think, look, they did something really stupid and bad and harming people, and they're going to pay, I think, a really extraordinary price, not just in this election, but in future elections too.
You say Republicans screwed up. Couldn't you also expand that and say the Supreme Court screwed up? And you look at the lack of confidence in the Supreme Court right now at record lows. I mean, is the Supreme Court ultimately to blame?
Well, Mitch McConnell's really to blame, actually. Mitch McConnell was the architect of the current 6-3 majority in the Supreme Court. He is the one. There would not have been the ending of Roe if they hadn't sneaked that sixth justice in, by denying Merrick Garland to be appointed back in 2016. So, I mean, the extremism of MAGA and the current Republican Party was on the ballot, and the Republicans had a really bad, the third consecutive election where they have underperformed expectations. And so it's my hope that the grip of MAGA is going to be loosened on the Republican Party, that the Liz Cheney wing of the Republican Party will be strengthened and emboldened, and that hopefully we're going to start seeing the return of the Republican Party to something that feels more like a conventional center-right political party in America instead of the extreme party that it's been.
Okay, but how much does having that happen, that prediction, that hope happen, depend on Donald Trump not ultimately running? Because otherwise that's going to push that off for a long time.
Or perhaps he runs and gets beat. I mean, what's interesting is that the new YouGov poll today has, for the first time, DeSantis beating Trump in a Republican primary. I think the air is coming out of the balloon of Donald Trump and MAGA. I mean, you saw Wall Street Journal attacking Donald Trump for being a loser this week, Rupert Murdoch publication. You saw the New York Post mocking Donald Trump, another Rupert Murdoch publication. I think that there is going to be an effort by many in the Republican Party to throw MAGA and Donald Trump under the bus for this very disappointing election. We obviously know that Donald Trump's not going to be very excited about that, right? And so I think there's going to be a lot of drama ahead. But I think that it's possible that we've seen MAGA peak now, and that we're hopefully